call this meeting of the common council to order. Roll call, please.
Alderman Lars. Konopky.
Here.
Niles.
Here.
Schrader.
Here.
Teeter.
Here.
Tully.
Here.
Meyer. Here. Randall.
Here.
Thank you. This time we'll entertain public participation. Anyone wishing to address the council may do so. We ask that you please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record and reason for appearing. Seeing no one, we'll move on right away to a presentation on the water system capital planning. Todd, you want to introduce this, please? Sure.
And have Ben Heidemann with me also. He's going to kind of.
Hi, Ben. Hi, everyone.
And the town country engineer. So basically, we have the 4 wells. We have a booster station in the lower pressure area of the city. The north tower and the south tower, which are probably the most obvious ones to you guys that know where they are. The next one. Again, kind of the 2 towers, 1.5 million gallons between the 2 of them. We have well 2, which pumps straight to system. Well 3 pumps to 2 reservoirs. And those are separate from the actual well structure itself. The other 2 actually have above ground reservoirs attached right to the well houses at wells 4 and 5.
Refresh my memory of the locations again.
We can go through that. So well 2, that is South Main Street across from Speedway and Cedar Creations. Well 3, which we'll be talking about a little bit tonight, that is the one by Stable Rock, between Stable Rock and the Racine Street Bridge. Well 4, that is corner of West Milwaukee, South Marshall, just east of the high school. And well 5 is off of North Gateway Avenue, kind of behind the Assembly of God Church. And we have the Wilcox Booster Station, that's on Wilcox Street. It's behind residence that's on a county-owned lot. And the North Water Tower off Ogden Street, next to the pool. And the South Water Tower by Walmart and Tyson's. Even though I really didn't take over the management of the water utility until March and December of 2020 is kind of when things started. There's a sanitary survey which the DNR does every 2-3 years for the water utilities. There was 1 significant deficiency identified, 7 standard deficiencies identified. There's a deadline of December 31st to get the work done. Water staff at that time in December contacted me and my staff to help complete the correction of deficiencies on some of the water towers and wells to basically be in compliance by the end of the year. So we didn't get further violations from the DNR. And I formally took over March of 2021 and kind of like, well, where are we going to start with this? And through meeting some of the consultants and everything that the water utility had used, found out through SEH that in 2017 they had done a master plan for the water utility. Also, kind of thrown in my lap was the AT&T 5G antenna that was planned on being installed onto the south tower. It's an upgrade of their 4G antenna. We're basically right in the planning phase of getting that done and the installation. So really, priority number 1 was the wells needed attention. They really, except for well 5, and that was being looked at because of some radium issues, hadn't gotten a lot of attention in quite some time. The only other one that was really in recent time, and that page is from the master plan, was well 2, and well 2 had some attention in 2011 when they were doing the radium filter that was installed on that well. So you see some of the other ones, there was really no recent in wells 3 and 4. So really, we needed to pull the wells and see what condition they were in. It's been for some time. So we had, well 4 ended up being first. We had that well down because there were some chemical upgrades, chemical feed upgrades being done at that well. So we're like, well, it's down, let's pull this pump. As you can see, these are some of the pump shaft couplers, and that is not a growth on that. That is actually the metal that's being eaten away on that coupler. Those should be like twice the thickness of what they are right there. We got a lot of corrosion. Go to the next page. Then we actually televised the well casing itself. Those are holes in the metal casing. Going through some of the grouting spots where we actually saw flow coming in through the actual well casing itself. So at that time, we formed a plan, got it approved through the DNR, chemically and mechanically cleaned the well for, going to kind of reduce some of the microbes that were causing our corrosion issues in that well. That was kind of the start of the supply chain issues. We delayed the project for pretty much the entire year. We really didn't get it online until basically right around January 1. In August, we rehired Rob Kincaid, who's the chief operator, water and wastewater utility. That was a big help for me. Can't say enough about the importance of keeping him on board and the importance that and help that he's provided to me with this transition and merger. Planning started for the implementation of the new AMI meter system and the equipment for the residents. And then we got the new casing well finally, the casing installed in the well, new pump, and well 4 was finally back online. This is routine maintenance. We finally had the wells back online, so we took 5 down, chemically treated that to reduce the microbes that had been occurring in that one. Next one, in spring, Rob had noticed we were getting flow coming out of the vent of the well, and obviously that's not supposed to be happening. So we took well 2 down for inspection. AMI equipment was ordered for the first kind of half of the system. Lead service replacement program. They decided they didn't really want to do that anymore, but I had Jefferson Utilities, so I took over kind of the administration of that. In March, finally got Tracy from Municipal Well and Pump out to pull that pump. You can see holes in the threading and the threads of the pipe shafts, or the pump piping, and the shafts are worn. Obviously some corrosion going on there. The actual pump itself had a lot of corrosion. It was soft. You could basically peel the metal away by just with a screwdriver. We televised that though also. Luckily it wasn't in the same shape as well 4 where we had holes in the casing, so, but we did have to put basically all new pump piping in, new pump. Obviously chemically, mechanically clean that also to hopefully reduce the same thing so we don't have the same microbes eating the metal away again. That again took till August because of supply chain issues of getting the materials on hand. Third and fourth quarter of this year, the AMI equipment was here. We started actually installation of the equipment. As of this afternoon, I think we have about almost 1,160 of them installed and up and running. Water main project and replacement and the street resurfaced on North Sanborn was a long, stressful project and frustrating at times. Obviously, it's not done yet, but at least there's a hard surface on the street and the water main is done. The lead replacement was, a large portion of that was on that street. We had like 45 participants in the program, not just on that street, but around town this year. Well 3, reservoir abandonment project planning started with Town and Country. As part of that, we just pulled the pump and pump piping for, well piping for that well itself. As you can see, that was in very bad shape. We had holes right through the piping where the pump screen there that was falling apart, and literally they basically said if we hadn't pulled it, it would probably been a couple months and we would have dropped the pump to the bottom of the well. So in addition to that, in addition to the planning, which we're going to kind of go through with Ben next, we just found out we have, throughout the year, we've been taking the samples now on well 4. We actually have radium levels above the normal limits. Well 2, one by Speedway, was the first one back in 2011-ish, 2010, where we started having radium issues naturally occurring. It's not something we're doing wrong. It's, in that system they put, in that well, they put a big filter in, very expensive. Well 5, one out by the Assembly of God Church. That was the next one that started having some radium issues. Some different solutions were found there, filling in the bottom of the well, some other chemically treating it on a schedule. We're hoping we can do something like that with well 4 as well, do some testing here coming up to find out where the radium is actually coming from. If it's coming from the bottom of the well where we can cap it off. We're also pumping at a higher level too, or higher rate than what we were. That might, with the new pump in there, it actually pumps a lot faster. That might have something to do with it as well. Those things are all gonna kind of coincide with this well 3 project, because we gotta do some timing, because we don't want to have 2 wells down at the same time. So before I turn it over to Ben, it's been a year and a half. Obviously we've gotten a lot done, a lot of stuff that needed to be done that was kind of neglected for quite a few years. But overall, even though it's been an interesting year and a half, it was exciting, it was frustrating at times, but we've got all the wells in pretty good shape, except for well 3 now. We'll be getting that up and running here and mechanically here next with this project, and I guess I'll turn it over to Ben to kind of take over on that.
Great. Can I just ask this quick question to you or Rob? What is the normal life expectancy of a well casing and the associated motors and pumping equipment?
Sure. A well casing can last forever. It's well taken care of and maintained. Suggested the full pump between 5 and 10 years for inspection, just to make sure everything's okay. Inspect the well at the same time too. Well 3 had been pulled down since 1998. That's how long it's been just pumping away and doing its own thing. So it's been neglected for several decades.
I guess with well 3 also, this slide, with the whole master plan, and just a little bit before the master plan came out, this was a memo, this was like number 1 recommendation by the master plan was actually abandoning the reservoirs at well 3. It came out memo in December of 2016, and I guess they really just never did anything with the master plan so much. So I couldn't really do it at first because we had to kind of address these other issues at some of the other wells. So it's kind of come full circle. We can finally start on well 3 and get that one in shape.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that with the number of wells we have and their capacity and what the daily usage is, we can generally get by with 1 well down? If it's more than 1 well, it gets dicey for any length of time.
For fire protection, having 2 wells down in space.
Yeah, you guys have enough capacity with any one of your wells out of service at any given time, but like Todd said, yeah, on a daily basis, you probably don't need more than 1 well running, honestly. But then it's your fire suppression ability is what then becomes sacrificed. So, Brian, you want to go on to the next slide there? There we go. So well 3 Todd pointed out, it's down the alleyway right over here, and that was identified as a part of the 2017 Water System Master Plan as being a high priority project. The well was originally constructed in 1946, so that is your oldest well. The well house there is, I can't remember, it's the original well house, though it's been added to and removed from twice now. That well that Brian circled on the map there pumps to two ground reservoirs that are at the top of the screen. So the well is pumping to those two tanks, and then there's pumps inside those tanks that pump it up to the same elevation as the water tower. The master plan study really identified this as a high priority because of the structural issues within those tanks. And this general arrangement where you're pumping with a well into a ground reservoir and then pumping it up to the system is a fairly old approach. Modern times, more often than not, those two tanks that are just to the north there don't exist. You're pumping your wells directly to your water tower. So that was identified. That's what it looks like today. If you want to go on to the next slide, what's being planned then, this is an excerpt from the plans that are prepared, is abandoning those two ground reservoirs that sit underneath the bridge. That space would then just turn into public parking, and then demolishing the actual well 3 building itself. Right now that building is like 16 by 16 square. The well pumped, the electrical controls, and the chemicals are all housed in one room. So the biggest need is to get the chemicals out of that room. Those chemicals are corrosive. 2 of the chemicals are incompatible with each other, that if they are mixed can cause explosions to occur. And in general, you just don't want those chemicals to be in the same space as your electrical equipment because it significantly deteriorates the life of the electrical equipment. So the plan is to demolish that existing building, keep the actual hole itself, and then build a new building around it. This is a rendering of the new building, so it's intended to be, it'll be about twice as big as the existing building is, intending to match some of the architecture of the buildings in that area. If you go on to the next slide, and the biggest components of this are, we'll be creating a dedicated pump and electrical room in that space. Then we can air condition it to extend the life of the electrical equipment, and then we'll create 2 chemical rooms adjacent to that, so we can keep the 2 non-compatible chemicals separated, and then similarly, just from a safety standpoint, you have the ability to keep those chemicals in spaces separate and vent them out individually and ventilate those spaces. Each of them would then have access from the parking lot side of the building.
So Todd, this is, Rob, this is part of the cost that we talked about when we had the fluoridation discussion, that there was going to be some capital improvement costs at each of our wells. This is an example of that, and that was what, $200,000 in
It could be a couple hundred per well. Now this project in total, I should point out, this is estimated between $2.5 and $3 million right now. But that's addressing a lot of different things.
Sure.
So of that, the fluoridation part of that is a couple $100,000. So as a part of this overall approach and design, and as Rob and Todd pointed out, well 3 had not been pulled in 24 years. So it was identified that that should get pulled. It got pulled 2 months ago roughly. And as Todd pointed out, what was found is there's quite a bit of significant corrosion. Well 3 itself, just random statistics, is a 12-inch diameter well that goes to a depth of 838 feet. 200 feet of that roughly has casing on it. So the casing is just a metal pipe that basically holds back the soil in the surrounding area and prevents surface contaminants from getting into your well. So then once you get to the area below the casing, that's where the actual water is coming from. That's the rock formations where the water is coming from. The well 3 is a very old well, fairly shallow casing. And another unique thing with that casing is there is no grout behind it. At the time that that was constructed, that was an acceptable practice. Nowadays, you would have a grout layer, a cement layer, that would basically create a seal between the casing and the soil around it. So pulled the well a couple months ago, found that there was a lot of corrosion associated with the pump. They televised that, found a decent amount of buildup and corrosion on that casing itself. So then went back through and basically mechanically cleaned the casing and found that different than well 4, where you actually had holes in your casing and you could see flow coming through them, you don't have any holes in this casing, but we could see quite a bit of corrosion and disappearance of metal to the point that where the casing pipe gets screwed together, you can actually see the threads coming through. So there's been a decent amount of corrosion on that. Based on that, we had conversations with Todd and Rob and laid out a handful of potential approaches. This does get a little complicated because in that situation where if you ever have a failure of that casing, you don't have any of that grout behind it to potentially protect you at that point. So similar, also, the well is a fairly small diameter well. A 12-inch well in today's standards is pretty small, especially given you get 1,000 gallons a minute out of it. But that being a smaller diameter well, that limits you to what potential future corrective actions are, because you have code required limitations on how much more you can do to that. So looking at what options, we laid out 4 different potential approaches. Number 1 is just roll the dice. You keep going and worry about lining that well or doing something with that well later. Option 2 would be you install a liner now. Lining a well involves hanging another casing inside the existing casing and then filling the annular space in between them with a grout. So basically it is though you were constructing something new. However, the DNR does require that there be a certain space between those casings, so that would force you to go down to an 8-inch diameter well. The challenge there is it severely limits what you have available for pumping, so it forces you to go to, I'll call it a little less reliable pumping arrangement, and could potentially limit you on capacity of that well in the future. Next one on the list was looking at something called a swedge liner, which is basically a repair liner that you hang down inside the well. It's corrugated, and then you basically pull a stretcher through it. It's like stretching your shoes out. It just sucks it to the side of the well, and then there's a neoprene backing on it. Those are a fairly new technology, not super utilized. The advantage there is it's keeping you to a larger diameter. You only lose about a 1/4 inch on each side. We have had conversations with DNR, and they have stated that they would not allow you to reline the entire well with a swedge liner. That could be used as a repair mechanism, but it would not be a full-blown, like new condition. Or you could drill a new well at that same site, honestly, and just move it 20 feet to the west and mirror the plan. Because you do, one thing I didn't mention is well 3 is probably your best well. You get really good water out of it, and you've gotten really reliable water out of it for the last 75 years. So we wanted to walk through all of this, realizing that option 1 does not necessarily eliminate you from doing any of those other options, other than option 4. If we build this new well house, realizing it's a very large investment for your community, we want to make sure everyone's on board with making the decision together. If you did number 1, you could still do number 2 or number 3, 10 or 20 or 30 years in the future. If you do 1, 2, or 3, though, you're never going to be able to do number 4 because the building is built around the hole that exists in the ground. I have the numbers pointed out on there. Again, we're talking in the $2.5 to $3 million range is the current estimate for a well house. Installing the casing, you'd be looking at somewhere between $90,000 and $125,000 to do the 8-inch casing, depending on whether you would elect to do a stainless steel approach to that. The swedge liner to do the entire casing, just for big round numbers, is just shy of $300,000. And a new well would be somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000. One of the challenges I will point out with the new well is one of them that we are concerned about with well 4 is, I pointed out well 3 has a shallow casing. DNR would likely require you to go to somewhere between 400 and 500 feet of depth with the casing if you drilled a new well, which could create a situation where you're drawing more radium into a well 3. You do have some radium in all of your wells, and in general, radium is associated with specific rock formations that if you limit how much water you have coming into the well, it could be drawing out of specifically a radium-producing area. And similarly, you just may not get the capacity out of the well that you do today. Right now, it's pretty easy to get 1,000 gallons a minute out of well 3. If you limit that open section of the rock hole, presumably you're going to have a pretty decent decrease in capacity out of well 3. So I guess that's the big picture. We've talked about it, Town and Country and Todd and Rob, and I think the intention or the desire from staff standpoint would be proceed with number 1. Did the well house as designed today, install the pump that was planned, realizing that you guys are going to be managing the wells differently than they have been over the last 24 years, and that you do have some safety mechanisms, being you can always implement items 2 and 3 down the road should you find a need to do further repairs on well 3.
And also with number 1, we would put in the chemical feed line so we can still keep treating it so the corrosion hopefully never gets as bad as what it has been up to this point. Try to keep everything under control, besides more frequent inspections.
That's, I think, the run of well 3. So really tonight it's, the design is at a point where we're ready to go out to bid. Obviously there's some new information found, but can take any questions on well 3 or anybody who has an opinion about.
What's the preliminary design estimate?
In terms of construction costs,
The
that's,
improvements, yeah.
yeah, we're talking 2.5 to 3 million is the total improvement cost.
And that gets us what again?
That would be, go back
Abandoning the
to the
reservoirs.
site plan once, Brian. It'd be abandoning the existing reservoirs, converting all of that, tying in water mains to where it's currently connected, turning that into parking lot, and then constructing new well house over top of the existing well 3 hole.
And,
Go one more, Brian. There.
and the funding source?
Right now, we've applied for Safe Drinking Water Fund loans through the DNR, so that was submitted back in June, which is a 20-year low-interest loan.
So we don't really know what the rate impact is of servicing that
Not
well.
at this point. You guys are going to be submitting for rate case coming up soon here, right? We started that, your accountants have.
Anyone have any questions?
So your big concern for the drilling of a new well is the question about rating, that if we
And
were,
capacity, yep.
because the rating would really, if we hit too much radium, that would,
Right.
is there a way of testing what would be done?
If you guys, if the council's desire was to go ahead with a new well, or at least investigate a new well, I would recommend doing testing on the existing well. So it requires some additional investigations on that existing well, and what you can do is, they actually have these things called packers, where you blow up basically a balloon, you hang a pump below that balloon, and it'll simulate as though you had cased it down to a deeper area. So we we can test then for what capacity you would get and radium. If you did decide to do a new well, that would result in pushing the project back another year though, because you would not meet any of your funding deadlines at that point.
So you also said that the new well would be about 20 feet over?
Yeah, just to the west of where the existing well would be.
So if we were to build this building, if we were to add it on an additional 20 feet, that if for some reason in the future, doing 2, 3 work wasn't gonna work and we needed a new well, would that be, does that make sense?
That really is not very feasible, because number one, you guys don't own a lot of property there.
Okay.
And number two is, that's exactly where your water main leaves the structures currently. So there's just a lot of things that would have to get moved around. It's not, if we moved it 20 feet to the west, we would just start day one with mirroring the building as opposed to just adding on to it in that direction.
Which one are you most comfortable with?
I think you have good options either in 1, 2, or 4. I think 3 is, in my mind, I would love for you to be able to do 3, but I don't think DNR will allow you to do 3. So, I mean, you have options in 1, 2, and 4.
The DNR, if we ended up with 10 years from now, a couple bad spots in the casing, they might let us do 3 to repair those.
For partial
just
repair.
Spot repairs and maintain the size of the pump and everything that we have.
So option 1 sounds harsh, but is it kicking the can down the road?
Potentially.
But the other thing is there's a risk with 4 that you're opening up another can of worms. I was
Correct.
using kind of layman's terms
Yep.
there.
That's-
a lot of unknowns with
Yeah.
4.
Yeah.
Anytime you drill a new well, you just don't know what you're going to get.
We don't know with option 1, I mean, like you said, it could be 10 years, it could be 30, 40 years if maintained correctly, that we don't have any issues, so that's an unknown alone.
The other question, with the radium, are we really getting more radium or is it how they're testing? I guess that's,
The radium has always been there.
yeah, I know it's always been there. Is it how they testing it or are we?
No, the test methods have been pretty similar throughout the years. Back in the day, uptight of regulations in the past. It's been a while.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a while. I think a lot of what you're seeing is, and a lot of communities have these challenges throughout Wisconsin. Specific to well 4, I think a lot of it has to do with you were getting some preferential flow through the casing. Because again, that well 4 had holes in the casing, so you've always had a baseline level of radium coming from somewhere in the aquifer. You were getting some shallow water coming in that was diluting it, basically. That fixing the casing actually hurt you a little bit. And then it's quite possible that the increased pumping rate, when you put a new pump in there and you've got more flow coming out, that you're now drawing water from an area of the well that it was not coming from previously, and that area is actually contributing more radium, which is why Todd brought up the idea of potentially throttling that well back and slowing down how much water comes out of that. So that one needs quite a bit more investigation. You've had a baseline of radium in really all of your wells, and it's the unique differences between them that makes it just slightly over or slightly under. And it's not like, 5 is the regulatory threshold. I think 3 is always floated right around 3 picocuries per liter. 5 is fluttered back and forth on top of it, and now 4 is just barely over that 5.
What is the cost and the timeline for the testing?
Of well 4,
No, of the testing to find out, would it have diminished capacity?
Oh.
And would there be additional radium? You said you could do some testing on it before you jump into drilling a new well. What
yes.
kind of money are you looking at, and what kind of a timeline? Is the well functional when you're doing that testing?
It is offline.
Yep. Well 3 is offline because of the condition of the well pump. They couldn't reinstall it, so there was no point in you guys purchasing another well pump because it's going to be a completely different well pump after we do the upgrades. Timeline-wise on that, we'd have to check with your well driller because it's requiring them to bring in pumps and equipment. It's probably something that wouldn't happen until late in Q1 or Q2 of next year. From what I've seen in the past, it's going to be somewhere in that $50,000 neighborhood probably. And then once they mobilize, install all of the equipment, do the pump testing, then there'll be another 6 to 12 weeks to wait for the results to come back. So realistically, if you wanted to do the testing on well 3, you'd be looking at midsummer probably before you have any sort of definitive answers. Which is why then that just pushes you another year for well 3 in terms of what you would potentially do there.
So you're recommending option 1?
That's what we've talked about at staff level is do option 1 now, realizing that you have some backup options coming down the road if bad things do happen.
And it sounds like there's been near total neglect for how long?
Last time the pump was pulled was 1996. That's recommended to do it between 5 and 10 years, right, in between pump pulls, just for investigation.
25 years.
Ben, I think you said we're really nearing the point of bidding the project.
Yes. Yeah, it's ready to go out to bid.
And what's the relationship between that time frame and a safe drinking fund loan? And, you know, that money isn't initially available right away, right? The city would likely have
Yep,
to
so you'll have to cash flow some of
a
it.
part of it.
Though I will say, so the way we've got the contract written right now for a contractor, because of the long lead times, they're probably not going to mobilize till this fall. Because the way we've set the contract up is there are parts and pieces of this that have about a year lead time to get the equipment on site. So we're, just to avoid you guys having your downtown tore up for another 18-month period, they won't be mobilizing until probably 6 months after you award a contract.
Will that subsidized loan fund at 100% the project cost?
Yes. So back to your original question, you have to have contracts executed and into DNR by no later than June of this coming year in order to get the 2023 funded year. Now you,
And money we spend on the front end is
Yep.
refundable by the loan.
In that, do you know how long that loan is amortized over, what the period is?
it's a 20-year loan. It ends up being 18 or 19 years, depending on the exact date of closure, but
Well, I think the big question is everyone really okay taking the step to bid this project out? I think that's where we're at, right?
yep.
Does anyone feel that we shouldn't do it, bid the project out at this point?
No.
This has to be done, I think.
Yeah.
So we have unanimous consensus to move forward with bidding, right? All we've got number 1. Take it from there. Is that good? Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming in. Resolution number 61, tonight's consent agenda. I'm going to ask Alderwoman Teeter to read that, please.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Mayor, fellow alderpersons and citizens of Jefferson. Resolution number 61, Be it resolved by the Common Council of the City of Jefferson, Wisconsin, that the consent agenda for December 6, 2022 is hereby adopted. Vouchers payable for December 2022 in the amount of $451,128.06. Payroll summary for November 18, 2022 in the amount of $162,639.79. Payroll summary for December 2nd, 2022 in the amount of $161,781.25. 2023 Humane Society of Jefferson County contract. Letter C, council minutes from November 15, 2022 of the Common Council. And D, license as approved by the regulatory committee with operator license, including temporary B license for the Optimist Club of Jefferson, January 28, 2023 at the Jefferson Fairgrounds. I would so move.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Meyer. Any discussion? The Humane Society contract was reviewed.
Mhm.
Right, if there are no other questions or comments, all in favor of resolution number 61, please signify by saying aye as your name is called, no if you're opposed.
Alderman Niles.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Teeter.
Aye.
Tully.
Aye.
Fire.
Aye.
Randall.
Aye.
Monteith.
Aye.
Resolution number 62, a resolution to endorse an updated highway functional classification system map for the city of Jefferson. Alderman Matkey, please.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. City of Jefferson, resolution number 62, resolution to endorse an updated highway functional classification system map for the city of Jefferson, whereas the Wisconsin Department of Transportation conducts periodic reviews and updates to the functional classification system of the streets across the state of Wisconsin, and whereas the Federal Highway Administration has issued guidance related to the Department of Functional Classification of Streets, and whereas the Wisconsin Department of Transportation has submitted recommended changes to the functional classification system of streets in the city of Jefferson, and whereas the changes proposed to the functional classification system of streets in the city of Jefferson are attached to Exhibit A, and the proposed change map is attached to as Exhibit B. And whereas the Common Council of the City of Jefferson has reviewed the proposed updates and finds that the proposed updates are consistent with Federal Highway Administration guidance and are consistent with Wisconsin Department of Transportation recommendations and justifications. Now therefore, be it resolved by the City of Jefferson that the updates to the functional classification of the streets in the city of Jefferson as outlined in the attached table, Exhibit A, and the attached Exhibit B are approved by the city of Jefferson, and the city administrator is hereby authorized to transmit this resolution to the appropriate state and federal officials. I would so move.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Teeter. Discussion. This was reviewed at the Streets Committee this evening.
Yes.
Correct. And the recommendation was for approval.
Yeah.
Ms. Brian has left us for the evening, so unless anybody else wants to offer comments about it, this is maintaining the present designation. It's just updating the map. Yes, to reflect that.
That's correct.
Okay. There are no other questions or comments. All in favor of resolution number 62, please signify by saying aye as your name is called, and all if you're opposed.
Alderman Schrader.
Aye.
Teeter.
Aye.
Tully.
Aye.
Fire.
Aye.
Randall.
Aye.
Monteith.
Aye.
Niles.
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you. Resolution number 63, a resolution approving the 2023 schedule of fees. Alderman Tully, please.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor Opperman. City of Jefferson, resolution number 63, resolution to set the 2023 schedule of fees. Be it resolved by the Common Council of the City of Jefferson, Wisconsin, that the council hereby adopts the 2020 schedule of fees as attached. Be it further resolved that the Common Council may revise or otherwise alter the schedule by resolution throughout the year as deemed necessary. Due to its length, in reading the complete text of this resolution, a complete copy is on file at the office of the city clerk and is available for public inspection. I would so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments?
I had a couple of questions, but the Parks Director was able to answer my questions that I had. One was a cleanup, and the other was just the increase on the fee for the aquatic center rental, but it was an increase from 1 hour to 2 hours, so the increase of the amount for the rental wasn't as much. It was from $70 to $175, but it was for 2 hours, not 1 hour. And then she also explained to me that it looked like we're not having any swim lessons, but it was just that to clean up that the lifeguards were taking care of the swim lessons. And so that's why it was just a cleanup, crossing out that. So she was able to answer all questions.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of resolution number 63, please signify by saying aye. Your name is called, no to oppose.
Alderwoman Teeter.
Aye.
Tully.
Aye.
Fire.
Aye.
Randall.
Aye.
Matkey.
Aye.
Niles.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
It's unanimous, thank you. Resolution number 64, a resolution to approve 2023 non-union wage resolution. Alderwoman Niles, please.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, citizens of Jefferson, council members. City of Jefferson Resolution Number 64. Be it resolved that the following wage and salary adjustments for non-represented, non-union employees are herein authorized. Due to its length, in lieu of reading the complete text of this resolution, a complete copy is on file at the office of the city clerk and is available for public inspection. So moved.
It's been moved, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Mackey. Any discussion? Anyone have any questions or comments? on the proposal? Explanations? Nothing? Okay. Well, moved and seconded, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Your name is called, no for the vote.
Alderman Tully.
Aye.
Fire.
Aye.
Randall.
Aye.
Matkey.
Aye.
Niles.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Teeter.
Aye.
It's unanimous. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the closed session pursuant to section 19.85 parent E of Wisconsin State statutes for deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session to discuss business prospects.
Move to adjourn the closed session.
Move, Alderman Schrader, second by Alderman Niles. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Your name is called.
Alderwoman Fire. Aye. Randall. Aye. Matkey.
Aye.
Niles.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Teeter.
Aye.
Tully.
Aye.
Thank you. We will reconvene to open session, but no more business will be done for this evening. Thank you.